I just wish I could get more used to people dying. You know, people die and they leave scars. You know, you kind of want them to leave a scar because you don't want their life to not matter or for things just to pass on and nothing happen. But you carry around the scars, which in some ways means that you love someone and maybe they loved you back. So the scars are not particularly bad and you can't see them. They're inside, and I certainly have mine. Sometimes I hear people say when someone dies, everything happens for a reason. What reason? No one ever seems to come up with the reason at a later time. You know, in the 70 years or so I've been alive, I've never once figured out the reason or had the enlightenment of what the heck that means. And it just makes me cringe, and it makes me pissed off, and it's like I want to just shake their teeth out. When we talk about grief, I think all of us tend to think that our grief is greater, deeper, worse than the other people's. I'm not sure that's the case, but I think we have a tendency to think that. But in reality, there's a lot of commonality in grieving. One is that there's usually shock involved. No matter if you knew the person was going to die or not, there seems to always be a shock factor. There seems to be an anger factor. It's like, oh, you know, and then there seems to be an idea that somehow you were cheated. You were cheated out of more time. You were cheated out of something. You should have had more time and you should have had a better situation or whatever. And the other thing is, I find that people always like to, on death, blame someone. If Jerry had taken her to the hospital earlier, if we hadn't put her on those medications, if we'd paid more attention. So a lot of that goes on. And I think in grief also a commonality is that, and certainly for me, is that when people die, they leave your life. So what happens is that your life is changed. You are a different person by their absence. And the family situation or the relationship that you are in, you know, changes and is substituted with something else. And so that change is a part of grieving. And then there's always the triggering that goes on. When you least expect it, after someone's died, you'll be triggered by something. One time flew to Dallas. My mother had died in the past year at that time, and I got sick for some reason, and I went in the bathroom and I threw up. And I remember just big tears in my eyes, and I just thought, I want my mother. I want my mother. And it's because she was always there. She was always the nurturing one. She was always the one that was concerned that I was sick or things weren't happening or I didn't feel good or I had a headache, and she was no longer there. And when my dog died, it was a year later, and I went to vote. And I walked around my house and I went, okay, I have my card. It's across the street. I don't need my wallet. I'm just forgetting something. And so I went out the door and I got halfway to the polling place, and I was triggered by the fact a year later that I always took her to vote with me. And I tied her up outside, ran inside, voted, came back out. We had a little walk and a little time. And so you never know when you're going to be triggered. I was searching for something I had read in the past, and I wanted to find it. So I searched for it, and it said, go to Reddit, and here it is. And so I clicked on it, and I got this from Reddit. And I'm going to share it with you because I think that it describes and tells us about grief as clearly as anything I've ever read. As for grief, you'll find it comes in waves. When the ship is first wrecked, you're drowning with wreckage all around. Everything's floating around you, and it reminds you of the beauty and the magnificence of the ship that was and is no more. In the beginning, the waves are 100 feet tall, and they crash over you without mercy. They come in 10 seconds apart, and they don't even give you time to catch your breath. All you can do is hang on and float. And after a while, maybe weeks, maybe months, you'll find the waves are still 100 feet tall, but they come less frequently. When they come, they still crash all over you and wipe you out. But in between, you can breathe. You can function. You never know what's going to trigger the grief. Might be a song, a picture, a street intersection, the smell of a cup of coffee. It can be just about anything. And the waves keep crashing, but in between waves, there is still life. Somewhere down the line, and it's different for everyone, you'll find the waves are only 80 feet tall, and then maybe 50 feet tall. And while they still come, they come further apart. The waves never stop coming, and sometimes you don't want them to. If you're lucky, you'll have lots of scars from lots of loves. I just thought that was beautifully written.
That's a lovely passage.
And there is no person who wrote it.
There's no one to get
So,
credit for that.
what has been your experience with grief?